been born into and raised in the world of the Rebbe, with my parents and grandparents, each having strong, clear connections with him. But I was only 7 years old on given times, and I imagine, like many in this room, I did not have a personal, tangible relationship with him. So, what does the Rebbe mean to me 30 years later, when there is no physical presence or personal interaction? What lessons can I take? Last week, I was in a car on the way to a funeral. The woman right sharing with me was talking about the current situation in Israel and difficult realities facing world Jewry. There's no light at the end of the tunnel, she said. And to be honest, it resonated with me. Me, who has grown up in what my 98-year-old grandmother has told me are the greatest times for the Jewish people since the times of King David. After some reflection, I understood what it is the Rebbe means to me. Hope, a vision of a better world, a lens of the world that sees the potential. The Rebbe grew up and began his leadership during the darkest times in Jewish history. His childhood was marred by pogroms, followed by communism, Nazism, and finally emigration to America. He endured the destruction of the old world, the murder of 6 million Jews, including members of his own family, and in the clash of religious life and the modern free world. And yet, when learning the first Hasidic discourse, he said at the start of his tenure as Rebbe, one is struck by the message of hope throughout. The world is a garden which God desired as his abode. Although through generations of disconnection, God's presence has retreated, it has been brought back down through acts of righteous people. And although it has again retracted, and we feel its absence, it's on its way back down. And through the work of our minds and hearts, we can bring this vision of a better world to fruition. During the darkest times, the Rebbe told the generation of abandoned Jews that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We have almost reached it before, and we can reach it again. And then he dedicated his life to this purpose and held the abandoned Jews by the hand and guided them towards the light. I may not have memories of the Rebbe or personal interactions to tell you about, but I have his Torah, starting with this discourse, and in thousands of teachings since that time, the message has remained the same. The Rebbe was a leader that acknowledges the brutal reality of the world we live in, the pain of disconnection between body and soul, and yet sees hope for the future, sees potential in every person, and an opportunity in every interaction. And then he did what few leaders can, and charges us, his followers, with an enormous task of building that better future. We are all working towards it, and the lessons of strength, resilience, and the importance of continuity are all inspirations the Rebbe gave us to accompany us on our long journey. The tunnel is both personal and communal, and there isn't just light at the end of it. Through our healing and kindness, we can become the light and illuminate the present. One Shabbos morning, a little while after Gimel Tammuz, 1994, my beautiful grandmother, Rebbetzin Devorah Grona of blessed memory, had a dream. She was standing on the seashore on the sand. There was a big cliff looming above her. A car was driving along the road at the top of the cliff, and it looked like it was going to drive off the road. At the last minute, the car stopped and the Rebbe got out and started climbing down the cliff. For her, knowing that the Rebbe had been paralysed at the end of the life and seeing him moving now was very emotional. She was afraid that at any moment he would fall. He came down and stood on the ground and looked at her in the eyes and smiled. He said, "Shverlich, it's hard work. Things won't be easy, but it can be done." My grandmother held on to those words of empowerment, that despite the hardship, she could make a difference. She leaned on that connection and inspiration to get her through. Tonight, we will hear from some speakers who will share how those connections teachings and inspiration have manifested in their own lives to lead them towards the light. We'll begin tonight with prayers for our brothers and sisters in the land of Israel and soldiers and for the hostages, with Rabbi Mendy Grona leading us into Hillen and Rabbi Moti Zieglerov with a prayer for the IDF and the hostages.
למנצח, יזמל לדוד, ינחל נביאים צרה, יסגן לחושן אל היתר, ישלח את זכו מקודש, ונציע יסודקה, יזכר כל מנחייסך, ולא שחי בשנסלה, ייתן לך חרמובך, וכל הצוסחים עלי, ורבנו בשורצך, ושם אליהם נתגלים עלינו, וכל משאר יסך, עתי ידעתי תישארם משיחי, יעניים בשני קודשי, וקודש ישימינוי, אלו ואנחנו אלו מסוסים, ואנחנו שאנחנו אלוהינו נזכיר. הם הכל ונפולו, ואנחנו קמנו, ונסוידון, עלינו ישיע, ולחיינו, וינקרנו.
מי שברך אבותינו אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא הגנה לישראל ואנשי כוחות הביטחון, ואת כל אחינו בני ישראל השבויים, הנעדרים והנתונים בצרה ובשביה, בעבור שאנו מתפללים ונותרים לצדקה בעבורם. בזכר זה הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמרם ויצילם מכל צרה וצוקה ומכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, עם כל ישראל אחיהם, ויחזרו הביתה בשלום בקרוב, ונאמר אמן.
The Rebbe and his teaching, when I discovered Chassidut, my soul opened to the idea that I have real purpose.
It's almost like my whole life was converging on this point. Like I have the ability to help here.
The world is now looking at Israel, and we must represent light and resilience.
I never met the Rebbe, but I feel the Rebbe's presence in my life very, very strongly.
I grew up in the mid-70s in North Tel Aviv. I grew up in what you would call probably a secular home. I knew of my identity as being Jewish, but to be honest, not much connection. All of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, but specifically my grandmother Hannah really influenced my upbringing. She was on the train that she later discovered was on the way to Auschwitz. She was lucky enough and brave enough to jump off that train. She lost her father, her mother, her brother and sister, but she survived. I was raised to be ready for something bad that was going to happen. My grandmother used to feed me huge amounts of chicken soup very early in the morning during the week to make sure that I'm fuller and stronger. So when the next horrible thing happens, God forbid, I can survive a few more days. So really anxiety became the essence of who I was. From a young, anxious girl, I became an anxious teenager, always worried, always concerned. I probably spent 15 years of my life going to psychotherapy sessions with 4 different therapists. But I felt I was hitting kind of the wall again and again. I was carrying deep sadness, fear, and anxiety.
As a young girl, I tried to be successful, but it didn't work out. I tried. The girls in my class, they had those cool hobbies in the afternoon, playing the flute, playing the guitar, arts and crafts. I was awful. Everything I did came out. It was a catastrophe. The end of Kita Aleph, first grade, my teacher asked me, what are you good at? Try to find the light. Try to find the skills you have. What are you good at? And I was good at reading and writing and speaking. I started interviewing all the kids in my class. I interviewed everyone. Each individual looked to me like a pearl, like a gem, like they have something to share with the world and I should convey the message. I should share the story. I interviewed all the kids in my school and then I was invited to be part of Israeli television.
תמשיכו לשלוח לנו פקסים ומכתבים, אנחנו נמשיך לענות. עכשיו נעבור למבזק בי.
At the age of like 7 or 8, I started interviewing Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, the President Shimon Peres.
אפרת אמר שהוא מוכן למות תמורת הבית.
That became my career. I was the the girl on TV, from TV in Israel. That was by, I became quite famous.
I graduated from the University of Michigan and I went off to travel the world. I ended up spending over 2 years in India studying yoga and meditation and began to pursue this yoga and meditation path for the next 20 years. As a lawyer, I soon became a mediator, and I developed a way of practicing law that focused on the emotional component of disputes. As a result of my practice, I ended up getting featured in the American Bar Association Journal. I was at that time fully involved in this yoga meditation group, and I was introduced to Rabbi Paltiel in Port Washington. He asked me if I had put on tefillin before. It had been at least well over 25 years since I put on tefillin. He said, sit in the chapel area, close your eyes, and meditate, which I did. And I had a very deep experience of tremendous stillness and calm. And this really intrigued me.
I started working in companies like eBay and Facebook. I became head of company culture at TikTok, but I found that I was revisiting childhood experiences again and again. I wasn't able to overcome this constant looking backwards. And at some stage, I was really frustrated with my upbringing, and I was wondering, why couldn't I have been born to a house maybe like my friend, who seems like they're having a great time, and they seem like happier and much more calm than I was. When I discovered the Rebbe and his teaching, when I discovered Chassidut, my eyes, my heart, and my soul opened to the idea that I have a real purpose and a strong meaning in my life. It was a journey, but something awakened inside of me, and I think it was my soul.
Rebischer hat gegeben, jeder Mensch, Malachas kamen wie kamen, jeder Rieden, zusammen mit den Möglichkeiten und den Kirches, was bekommt, gibt mir eine Nähe die Möglichkeit. Soll sie entwickeln in der Fuß der Moos.
I learned from the Rebbe that we are special and we have a special task, purpose, journey to take in this world. Every single person has the potential to lead. What does it mean to lead? To understand who you are, what makes you you, and what is the role that you can play in this world.
Demut wird sein mit der Hatzloch, worin geht in den Weg, was in Bahasomel, was zugepasst zu seinem Charakter und zu seinen Möglichkeiten und zu seinen Schlichus, wo der Rebischter hat ihm gegeben.
We often don't understand, why is this going on? Why is my life not perfect? What I realized was that was the right journey for me. And that actually the experiences that I had, and some of them were painful, those were the right experiences for me, for my soul.
חזרנו, לא בכל יום מגיע אורח כזה לאולפן, הוא המילואימניק הוותיק בצה"ל.
I thought there's like a separation. I'm a journalist. When I'm at home, I keep mitzvot. And when I'm there, the studio, interviewing people, Rebbe's view, understanding the concept of shlichut. It's not like either you're a good journalist or you're a good Jew. There's no contradiction. The contrary, it fits. If you're good at something, this is your shlichut. That's what you're supposed to do. When you have the mic, when you talk to people, you convey a message. For me, that was really revolutionary.
I wrote something about Parashat HaShavua, the weekly portion we read in the Torah. In a minute, Facebook informs you this was the most popular post you ever posted. I was shocked. I was sure, of course, it's a mistake. So the next day, I tried again. Boom. The same magic happened. Today, this daily portion became a project. We have hundreds of thousands of people. We reach out to them every day.
Today, I have a Torah class every week on TV, on Israeli TV. And it's not a religious channel. Everything I do is affected from this perspective of shlichut, of a mission. It changed my life.
10-7 is something that no one Jewish has experienced in 2 generations. Nothing like that has happened since the Holocaust. So many Jews were murdered just for being Jewish. I mean, who was able to sleep the night when they heard? Who was able to sleep for weeks afterwards? And I think every Jew wanted to know, what can we do? I was on Twitter, and the algorithm happened to show me a tweet saying, if there's one man anywhere in the world that will commit to start wearing tefillin every single day, I will get him a pair of tefillin. When I saw that, it like smacked me in the face, and like a light bulb went off. Like, this is what the Rebbe talked about always. The Rebbe explains that by wearing tefillin, it's a special merit that our enemies will fear us and that we'll be victorious in war. And I right away knew that this is what the Rebbe wants from me. I run a very successful deals blog with my brother Dan. And I'm like, do you want to split 50 pairs of tefillin and offer them on our website to men that want to start rapping every day? He said, like, yeah, like also, same as you, like, amazing, like, let's do this. We put up a form on our website to sign up. Within a few hours, we had hundreds of applicants of men that wanted to start rapping tefillin every single day. A few days later, we found out that Hamas had taken 1,200 souls from us. I got so angry in that moment that I decided that we must get 1,200 men that are committed to rapping tefillin every single day a pair of tefillin. And that's how we're going to be able to commemorate the 1,200 souls that Hamas took from us. When I started the campaign, friends of mine told me, you're crazy, you have to raise $1 million. I've never done anything like that before, but I felt it deep in my soul that that's what we have to do.
Since October 7th, people are so confused. I mean, we were shocked, we were devastated. And I looked at the Rebbe's perspective in order to find solutions and meaning, and I realized I must convey messages of faith and hope and optimism. That's my mission, that's my task.
There's good parnasa and good health.
Thank you,
and good news about spreading Yiddishkeit around here. That's one of the main endeavors of every one of the Jews, me included.
I never met the Rebbe, but I feel the Rebbe's presence in my life very, very strongly. I used to live my life which is focused on myself and my family. But through many of the Rebbe's talks, I learned that we all have a circle of influence. And it's much broader than we believe. And as we start tapping that circle of influence, it starts expanding. I proposed to a friend of mine that he come over on Shabbat and we studied the Parsha. And as time evolved, it started expanding to now over a dozen people. The people in the Torah class have shared how profound that has been for them in their lives. They're now studying Torah on Shabbat. Most of them are attending every Shabbat for services. The women are lighting Shabbat candles. They share how they've now encouraged other people in their circle of influence to do the same. My wife and I proudly say that these are our grandchildren because the people we've influenced are now influencing others.
What I learned from the Rebbe is every single person has potential. And my role is to look into people's eyes and see that potential and help them grow, fulfill, and bring to life their potential. I was fascinated to discover that there was a Jewish wisdom. Your presence has purpose. Find out what is purposeful, not just for you, but for the world.
Stay a journalist, a lawyer, whatever you do, but just change the way you look at others and be more active.
The Rebbe always said, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. If you have something to give it. I had this platform, getting 5 million people visiting it every single day from around the world. And this is our chance to use it. Like, I was in an Ivy League law school when I left to join my brother. And it's almost like my whole life was converging on this point. Like, I have the ability to help here. I have the ability to do something.
Just like the Lubavitcher Rebbe said once, we should not be fans, we should be players. I think that's the deepest message to nowadays Jews. I'm sure he would like us to be shlichim. I even think maybe that's our mutual mission. 30 years since Gimel Tammuz. We seriously need everyone.
People think that leaders are just the ones that have 3 million followers on Instagram, or they're heads of country or CEOs. the Rebbe told us something very different. Every single person has the potential and is a leader. Remind yourself that you have a role and purpose in this world and take action on the unique purpose that you have.
After graduating VCE in 2012, Rabbi Bochi Broh embarked on an enriching journey abroad, ultimately achieving ordination as a rabbi. His travels took him to various colleges across the US and communities worldwide, where he passionately engaged in community building, Jewish education and outreach in places like Belgrade, Serbia, and Lagos, Nigeria. Upon returning home, he married Miriam Kornhauser. Today, Bochi serves as the director of Chabad on Campus Melbourne, dedicating himself to nurturing Jewish life and leadership among university students. He also holds the position of honorary chaplain at several universities, including Melbourne, Monash, and Deakin. Please welcome him to share with us tonight his experiences on the front lines with Australian Jewish youth.
Good evening, everyone. So, when meeting new people, be it sitting around a bonfire, on a shidduch day, or a local Chabad house event, the easiest way to get to know each other is by asking some questions. What's your name? What school do your kids go to? And another one of those questions would be, what do you do for work? It should be simple to answer: a lawyer, a doctor, a property developer, a pulpit rabbi. Yet, it's here when I always find myself stumped and find it very tough to say. I've gone from answering I'm a Jewish chaplain to a traveling rabbi, a Torah teacher, events organizer, or I'm a bagel schlepper. The truth is, I don't have a regular job. I do not have set hours, and every day brings new surprises, and I meet new people. Many a day, as I'm schlepping a bag of 100 bagels through the campus, be it Monash, Melbourne, Deakin, RMIT, ACU, I ask myself, what exactly is my job? Up until 9 months ago, my regular schedule consisted of traveling to different campuses each day, bringing along a kosher lunch and having a picnic with the Jewish students. You might be wondering, how do I find the Jewish students? For some, you can tell they're Jewish a mile away. But for others, do you mind coming up for a second? Do you mind coming up? Yeah. Yeah. This is impromptu. Sorry. So for others, this is what I would do. If I see someone like this gentleman, he looks like he could be Jewish. As he walks past me...
First time I look like a student. Huh?
Yeah, so walk past me like this.
Okay.
As he walks past me, I would just say in Jewish, like, cholent, like a filter fish. And based off, if he looks at me, I'm like, oh, he knows what it is, he's Jewish, and then I bring him back with me. If he gives me a very weird look, I let him go.
So there's truth or no truth? You only say words, huh?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you very much. Generally, that's how I find my Jews. Anyways, so that was what happened when I met Leon, who's a former Bialik student on campus. Leon shared with me when we became close how he has a farm. It's actually a working cattle farm in Hillsville. And it didn't take long before Chabad of Hillsville began. He brought the gang, I brought the snacks. And it was actually at one of those parties where I met a friend of his named Itai, who in turn introduced me to his friends, who now are all coming to a ski trip in 3 weeks, which over 70 students I'm taking to the snow for 3 days, and all of them, I met them in very similar ways. Now, part of the role I do is we run a program called Sinai Scholars. It's an eight-week course of Judaism. Now, one of the students who joined, we'll call him Michael. As soon as he met me, he said, I'm a very strong atheist. Okay. We had great discussions, but halfway through the course, I realized maybe this isn't for him. He started asking a lot of questions, and I was nervous he would turn other people away. Anyway, fast forward a few weeks, and we do an annual Shabbat 500, and I went around to some students and I said, hey guys, would you like to join the program? And they said, not really. I said, okay. They asked, do we know anyone who did it? So I mentioned a few names, and one of the names I mentioned was Michael. They said, wait, Michael, like Michael? I'm like, yeah. He's like, what? He did it? Oh, if he did it, we could also sign us up. And I realized everything happens for a reason. Much to my surprise, Michael, the atheist, or so-called, at the graduation ceremony, he got up and he said how inspired he was from the course. And currently, he's dating a Jewish girl from that same cohort. It's one of the things I love most about what I get to do. I get to see Hashgacha Pratis, which is divine providence. A great #HP moment was on Shavuos. We had an event in our home, and one of the rabbis from Melbourne, Chabad of Melbourne, he put me in touch with a student. He said, this student, he's actually involved with J for J. We'll call him Tony. So Tony came to our home, and when I asked him how he is, he said, not doing great, maybe better talk to the other students. So I let him be. At the end of the night, I was 2 a.m. cleaning up, and I found a backpack. Well, someone left something behind. So I opened the bag to see whose it was. And out I pulled some Christian books. It doesn't take Sherlock to realize who left this bag behind. Anyways, I went to bed. The next morning, I was in shul davening when I got a tap on my shoulder. It was Tony. Tony told me he came back the next morning to try get in his bag, but no one answered. A friend of mine was on the way to shul and saw Tony, breaking into my house, what he thought. So he said, what are you doing? He said, oh, I'm looking for Bochi. He said, come, I'll show you where he is. So he brought Tony to shul. So I told Tony, do you mind if I wait a few minutes just to hear the 10 Commandments? He said, okay. So he stayed in shul. Now, on the way back home, I said, do you mind if I stop by my in-laws' house just to make kiddush, grab a bite? He said, okay. 6 hours later, Tony is sitting by the table, farbrengening, saying l'chaim amongst all the Jewish students, all the Jewish people by the table. He then tells me, he says, thank you so much, I really needed this. Chabad knows how to do it. The food, the company, it was just all so warm. I really needed this in my life, and I will definitely be back. Eventually, I returned his backpack, minus a few books. So, coming back to our original question, what is my job? You can see while hard to define, it keeps me busy. Before I continue, I want to share a line called Shaliach Shel Adam Kamoisei. It means a messenger is part and parcel with the person who sent him on that mission. In my case, I'm a Shaliach of the Rebbe. But to be real honest, I didn't feel like I was a messenger of the Rebbe for the first few years. In fact, there was times where I'll go to the much smaller campuses, such as ACU or Latrobe or Swinburne, and sometimes I'll be by myself, just hanging around with my bagels, waiting for the few students to finish class. So, exactly a year ago, with my wife's encouragement, I spontaneously flew into Crown Heights for Gimel Tammuz. It was the first time I traveled there in over 5 years, and I took it very seriously. It was a time to reconnect with my leader, the Rebbe, and to recharge my batteries. I can't pinpoint to anything specific that happened or I did, but everything changed when I got back to Melbourne. I had a different attitude and perception on things. I was looking at the world the way the Rebbe does, with a complete positivity bias. For the first time, I started to feel it wasn't just me going around campus, but I was representing the Rebbe. And when the Rebbe has your back, it gives you all the confidence you need. Little did I realize how important this boost was. It was the cure before the sickness. The Rebbe was preparing me for what was to come. October 7th happened, and everything did change. I don't believe I have to describe what was going on campus, but yes, university became very hostile for the Jewish students. The posters were everywhere, it was in your face, there was no ignoring it. Before long, my role began to drift into uncharted territories. As a Jewish chaplain, I had a unique platform to strengthen the Jewish students' morale on campus, and here's some examples of how it played out. One Friday, I had to go into campus to have a meeting with the Pro-Vice Chancellor. My number one rule, I don't leave my house without food to give out. So, after the meeting, I posted on one of the WhatsApp groups saying, whoever wants, I'm here for the next 20 minutes, come grab something. While I was sitting there, a girl came named Mia. I didn't know Mia too well. I heard she had quite different views to me. In fact, one of her friends was very involved in the anti-Israel protests. So he suggested to me, perhaps let's go into the encampment and speak to them. I'm sure they have good intentions. And we started to head there, while the other Jewish students stayed back to watch. Now, dressed in my hat and jacket, I inconspicuously scoped out the encampment boundaries, looking for the easiest way to enter without making a scene. I felt like a spy that Joshua has sent, looking for the weakest points around Jericho. Eventually, I spotted it. There was a few harmless-looking woke students, bright pink and blue hair, sitting around chatting. Easy. So I crossed the line into the encampment and come up to them. Hey guys, what's going on? What's your names? They look up and they say their names. I sit down and start speaking. Within a few moments, quite a crowd started to gather. How did this rabbi infiltrate? So as a peace offering, I offered them one of my remaining bugelach, and they accepted it. They then offered me back some food. I asked, kosher? They looked at me. No. I said, wow, that's not very inviting. I proceeded to ask them, do you mind just to take your phone out? So one of the people that took their phone out, can you put in a timer for 5 minutes? It's winter, it's an early Shabbos. Okay? And I spoke to them a little bit about Judaism. Now, the beeper went and I told them I got to go, and they asked, could we meet up next week? We'd love to hear more about Judaism. Sure. As we were walking back, me and this girl Mia, she opened up to me and we started to have a very meaningful conversation. Now that week, my wife ran a Torah class for girls, and we had a Shabbos meal Friday night. I don't have to tell you who was present by both. Mia is someone who we're very close with now. The next story happened Pesach Sheni. It was a Wednesday, and I brought matzah to share with the students in Melbourne University. It happens to be that the protesters had peacefully taken over the arts building. Now, despite feeling intimidated and nervous, the Jewish students wanted to see what was going on, so they asked me if I can accompany them. I was more than happy to. As we approached their building, I asked the keffiyeh-wearing person if there's any Jews inside. He said he thinks so. So in we went. And there I found my first victim, a girl. I asked her, do you know Pesach Sheni? She said, no. I quickly found out, sadly, she didn't know anything about her Jewish heritage. So I sat down again and began explaining the story of the Jewish people from Abraham. When I got to the part about Moshe, I heard another voice nearby say, do you mean Musa? I said, yes, but in Hebrew we say Moshe. But welcome to story time. We were there for 20 minutes, and there was a large group of students sitting around listening to the story of how the Jewish nation was born. Then this girl, she says to me, do I agree and support the hard work that they're doing protesting against this cruel state of Israel? Now, the Jewish students which I brought in were still with me, and I wasn't sure what to say without things getting too hostile. In general, I'm not a confrontational person, and I was put on the spot on their turf. But, Baruch Hashem, I got to answer clearly, no, I do not agree with this. I'm a big supporter of Israel. But, why? Yes, thank you. But, let's not talk about things that divide us. Let's speak about things we have in common. So tell me, are you planning on lighting Shabbos candles this Friday night? And we continued talking about Jewish life for the next little bit, and then she took my number down so we can get in contact later. As we were leaving the building, this story is crazy. As we were leaving the building, I'm walking past and I hear someone whisper to his friend, no one knows I'm actually Jewish. I continued walking and I was like, what? Did I just hear someone whisper? I thought it was a joke. I turned back and I'm like, wait, excuse me, are you Jewish? He looks at me, he's like, oh no, yeah. I was like, okay. Well, that's how I met Caleb. So we skipped the bris, but we had a quick bar mitzvah, very quick tefillin, and after that we had a coffee this week, and there's going to be some nice big events happening on campus with him and his friends. Now, sometimes it is hard to look past the externalities of people, especially in cases like these, where they so strongly oppose what you believe in. It's hard to look past it. But as the Rebbe always taught me, when you dig through the dirt, you get to the soul deep inside. And in a way, we're all lost souls down here, just trying to make our way through the schmutz. And we want to connect to something greater. We're lucky that we found the truth. So we just need to help the other souls find their way back home. And this took me to Monash Clayton, the largest Jewish presence of students, to the extent we have a Jewish room. And I organized a barbecue with a lock on it. 613, if anyone wants. So one morning, I was walking past an encampment there, and there was a Channel 9 News doing a report. I caught eyes with the guy filming, and I did the good old, these guys are crazy. He nodded at me like this. Poor guy had to film it. Just then, a few boys walked towards me. They looked Jewish. I said, do you guys want to put on tefillin? They're like here? I said, sure. And boom, the encampment became the hottest spot for tefillin. It was the new destination. If you can't get a tefillin selfie by the kotel, at least get it by the encampment. Now, in all seriousness, these students, who aren't regular strappers, were so keen to put on tefillin, at times I had a bunch of them lining up, waiting to get strapped. One of them summed it up for me. He said, I'm a completely secular Jew. I don't put on tefillin. But because of these idiots, I'm going to put on tefillin right here to clearly show that us Jews won't be intimidated and will be proud no matter what. This was the spirit the majority of Jewish students showed. It was, and it is my main objective in Shlichus, to bolster the Jewish pride. It's why I walk around campus everywhere, very visibly Jewish. Hence, the pink yarmulke. I do it so Jewish students shouldn't feel afraid to go anywhere. To the extent, I made it a point to walk into every encampment and just hang out, just so people can see, don't be afraid. At one point, I actually was thinking of starting to give encampment tours, but that didn't quite happen. And I generally encourage all the students to wear their Magen Davids out, and if they're comfortable, to put on their kippahs. I have a WhatsApp status where I post the students who are wearing them out, so it became a bit of like a thing. Now, there's no excuse for every single person here to not be influencing their surroundings. It's a responsibility the Rebbe has tasked every one of us to do. Just because you're not a rabbi is no exemption. It actually might be specifically because you are not a rabbi that you can reach and impact certain people that a rabbi can't. Take, for example, a guy named Andrew. Him, Ben, Johnny, a few of the guys, they host Tefillin Club every Friday with drinks. Now, these guys work hard, but they didn't understand the importance of Jewish life. So it happens to be Andrew was at a property auction once, and the agent who was selling, his last name was Jacobson. Andrew figured, might be Jewish, struck up conversation, and next week, guess who came to Tefillin Club? That's right. So if you don't feel like you have what it takes, perhaps you think you're shy, or perhaps the people you're talking to aren't going to be receptive, you can take a look at my channel on Instagram. It's called 613 Strangers. It's where I interview strangers about Judaism. When the Rebbe says it's small acts of goodness and kindness that could change the world and bring Mashiach, he meant it. It's up to us now. So let's stop thinking so much and start influencing. L'chaim, and thank you.
Thank you, Bochi. I don't think we all thought we were going to laugh as much as we did when talking about what's happening at university campuses. Our next speaker, Baila Brackman, is a dedicated educator and community leader known for her passion for fostering Jewish life and learning. Baila and her husband established the Broh Chabad Center for Jewish Life and Learning at the University of Chicago and Hyde Park. Baila has played a pivotal role in shaping young minds and instilling a deep appreciation for Jewish values and love for Torah and mitzvahs. Her energy, enthusiasm, and deep commitment to Torah values has been a guiding light for those seeking to embrace their Jewish identity and make meaningful contributions to the world around them. Following October 7, college campuses have encountered significant challenges. Baila has been on the front line, offering support to students and community members amidst these trying times. She will recount her experiences of navigating and bolstering the college campus community during this period of adversity. Please welcome Baila.
Esteemed friends and the Australian community, it is an honor to be here and join your community as we commemorate the 30th Yartzeit, the day of passing of the Rebbe, Menachem. As I am in Chicago, giving the talk at 5 a.m. is a first for me, but being with all of you is very special. Tonight, as we gather together, we stand on the threshold of a significant milestone. It has been 30 years since the passing of the Rebbe, grant this memory. For many of us, the memory of that day is still as fresh as it was today. I can visualize where I was standing, the people around me, and the sense of loss that enveloped us all. The Rebbe was more than a spiritual leader. He was a guiding light, a source of wisdom, and an unwavering advocate for the Jewish people. His vision and teachings inspire and guide us, particularly in these challenging times for Israel and the global Jewish community. As we reflect on the Rebbe's enduring legacy, we remember his profound dedication to spreading Torah and the love of Judaism to every Jew, regardless of where they were in the world. It is this mission that my family and I have devoted our lives to bring the Rebbe's fight to our corner of the world, in Chicago, and particularly at the University of Chicago. This past year has been unlike any other. Across the Jewish world, we have experienced unimaginable grief, yet we've also witnessed a surge of fierce determination. It is as if we've been struck by a powerful wind, only to be lifted by a surge of adrenaline, compelling us to rise and support one another to keep moving forward despite the challenges. Through it all, our Jewish communities have come together, bridging gaps between the religious and the secular, showing solidarities in ways that speak to our deepest values. This collective unity has strengthened us, providing a renewed sense of identity and commitment to our heritage. On Simchat Torah, we rose to a new challenge. As we prepared to gather in a shul, we received the heartbreaking news that shook our entire world. At that moment, I felt an overwhelming need to turn to God, to pull out my Tehillim, my book of Psalms, seeking guidance and how to remain strong during what seemed like the world was a wreck. Yet I knew I couldn't dwell on fear. I had to channel my energy into lifting others to ensure that Simchat Torah remained a source of joy and resilience. We celebrated the holiday in fervor, ensuring that students and community members felt the warmth of our Judaism despite the tragedy that had unfolded. Our mission continued in the following days. A student, Yair, came to our Baila with a heavy heart, having decided to leave school and return to Israel to fight. I was struck by the gravity of his decision, and I felt a mother's instinct to offer him a blessing for safety and success. Watching him leave and knowing the risks he was taking filled me with a sense of awe and fear. It reminded me of the young souls that we guide often are willing to sacrifice everything for the survival of our Jewish people, Am Yisrael. We worked relentlessly to support our students and the wider community the following weeks. Students came to us from every corner. Their souls were seeking light amidst the darkness. We distributed mitzvot. We stood on campus, even surrounded by anti-Israel slurs and comments. We put the tefillin on the young men. We encouraged the women to light Shabbat candles. And we provided comfort to those that were grappling with anti-Semitism and fear on campus. We did everything possible to shield our own children from the anti-Semitic shouts and slurs that they should have never witnessed. One day, things on campus were especially tense. There was a loud and aggressive anti-Zionist, anti-occupation rally that was taking place. And the student came running into Chabad. She was crying uncontrollably. I embraced her and I held her close as she sobbed. She didn't need words. She just needed the presence of someone who cared. Later, I learned that a visiting mother had taken a picture of me holding this young woman tight. She sent me the picture and she wrote, "I took this so you would remember and I could show my friends what a Rebbe is for during these challenging times." In such moments, the Lubavitcher Rebbe's teachings have always guided me. I draw strength from his words, whether in times of joy or deep despair. Before the Yom Kippur War, the Rebbe urged us to increase our good deeds with true joy. Weeks before Yom Kippur, he called for a gathering of Jewish children at the Western Wall to pray together. It seemed unusual at the time, but we followed his guidance. Once the war began, we saw his profound involvement. Many Chabad Hasidim served in the IDF, while others visited soldiers, helping them to put on tefillin. The Rebbe even wrote personal letters to the families of the victims, offering solace during the darkest hours. The Rebbe's message in such turmoil: increase in joy. Find joy despite the chaos. How can we feel joy when Israel is under attack? But now I understand that in times of war, we need to maintain a high morale. You can't win war with tears. You need courage, strength, and positivity. So when we find ourselves stuck, whether on a personal or communal level, remember to keep moving forward. Don't let obstacles hold you down. Focus on what God has tasked us with, keep going, and trust that God will do the rest. There were days when our campus felt like there were two wars, one in Israel and one on college campuses around the country. And unfortunately, this campus war is still strong and frightening to the many young Jewish students. We woke up on the last day of Pesach to a Gaza encampment on our quad. It was worse than you could imagine and more disgusting than anything that you can envision. I ran with my son on the quad to support the students, to hug the girls who were crying, and to just be a familiar face to anyone that needed it. We grabbed some kippahs, yarmulkes, and encouraged the boys to put them on. One young boy came up to me, I had never met him before, and asked for a kippah. He said to me, "I never wear a kippah, it's not my thing. But today, I want to wear a kippah. I want to show them that I am a proud Jew." Lily, a first-year college student, came to Chabad one day asking for Shabbat candles. She felt that lighting Shabbat candles was the one mitzvah that she could do for Israel. Later, she sent me a photo of her Shabbat table in New York, complete with challah and Shabbat candles. Her parents, Russian Jews, without a strong Jewish upbringing, were now joining her in embracing the beauty of Shabbat. Lily now comes to Chabad for Shabbat dinners almost every single week. One night, we hosted a gathering. It was just a relaxed bonfire with drinks, snacks, and friends. It had been a very, very tense day on campus, and we just felt we needed something that students could do to get their minds off of what was going on. I sat next to a young woman named Heather, and she said to me, "Baila, I need to tell you. I've been dating a non-Jewish young man for a long time, and actually I thought I was going to marry him. But with everything going on in Israel, he's just not feeling my pain. He's just not understanding what I and my Jewish brothers and sisters are going through. And I am no longer with him. And hereon I told myself that I will only date Jewish men. I'm a Jew on Israel. I was very taken by her words. And finally, a few weeks before school ended, was about the worst I had seen on our quad. There were about 1,000 students on the quad, and things had erupted terribly. Both sides were facing off. It was scary and appalling, and honestly, I could not believe what I was seeing with my own eyes. I will have these horrific images in my head for a long time. We had our sons in our buff room setting up emergency filling stations. They were blaring Jewish music over the speakers, which were hard to hear with all the shouting. And I just didn't think I could handle another moment of the chaos. As a matter of fact, my youngest son was holding up a big American flag because all the college students had come out with American flags to support our country as well. And the Chicago Tribune took a picture of him. And the next morning in the Chicago Tribune, unbeknownst to us, was the front cover picture was my son holding up an American flag with his kippah and his tzitzis flying. And I thought, how beautiful, look at this. On the college campus, the picture they chose was my son with his kippah and his tzitzis and his Jewish pride. Anyways, it was completely chaos, and I wasn't sure that I could handle another moment. I debated if I should just go home. When I saw a couple with their son come up to my husband and the yeshiva students who were putting on the fill-in, and they said, what's going on this campus? We only came to look. We only came to see because our son is considering coming to the University of Chicago next year. And of course they came on the wrong day, the absolute wrong day, because when they left they said, we don't think this is where our son is going to be going. But they were watching the yeshiva students put fill-in on these young men. Most of them were wearing American flag and Israeli flag, and these were young kids who had never put on fill-in but just wanted to show their Jewish pride in the chaos. And this young boy turned to my husband and he said, can I put on fill-in? He said, I had never put on fill-in before. As a matter of fact, I never had a bar mitzvah. And of course, my husband said, let's do this. And amidst the chaos, with probably more than 1,000 students standing there, there was Chicago police, there was University of Chicago police, we had riot police there. It was like a scene out of a movie. It was crazy. And there was this young boy putting on the fill-in, having his bar mitzvah for the very first time. And when he finished, of course, it erupted in dancing, and the yeshiva students started to dance with him. And I thought to myself, perhaps this is the reason why we're out here on campus. So that this young man who had never had a bar mitzvah can have a bar mitzvah and put on the fill-in for the very first time. We've observed a growing number of Jewish students seeking guidance, experiencing deep pain, and yearning for connection. If we can't be there in person to support our brothers and sisters in Israel, we must take spiritual action. We must perform a mitzvah for our brethren. Each time we do a mitzvah, we connect to God, illuminating the world and bringing light into the darkness. Let us take this moment to reflect on the Rebbe's teaching, to draw strength from his example, and to continue his work with renewed dedication and love. Let us storm the heaven and pray to God for the safety of the Jews around the world, especially for our brothers and sisters in Israel, and for our brave IDF soldiers, for the ultimate redemption, the coming of Mashiach. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a joy to be with you in Australia, all the way from Chicago. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
We'll now hear some Nigunim of the Rebbe from Sadia Liberov and Shmuley Rosenbaum. We know that music and Nigunim play a central role in Hasidic life, and they've chosen two very special Nigunim to sing with us tonight, Samalacha Nafshi and Vehishanda.
Yeah.
One musician to the next. Our next speaker is Joshua Moshe, who is an award-winning saxophonist, composer and producer who combines the spiritual essence of nigunim, the improvisational spirit of jazz, and the time-honoured melodies of Jewish songs in celebration of the rich diversity of Jewish culture. I don't think he's playing for us tonight, but I have had the privilege of hearing him, and I strongly suggest you all find out where he's playing next. Joshua's family recently made national news after being the target of anti-Semitism and boycotting in Thornbury. I'd like to welcome Joshua, who will share his personal journey of Jewish pride and resilience.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. It is an honour to be here speaking on the occasion marking the 30th Yartzeit of the Rebbe of righteous memory. I must be honest though, when I saw a phone call coming from Rabbi Baila My first thought was, oh, he must be calling me for a gig. Like many musicians, I await the next phone call for the next performance with great anticipation and excitement. Needless to say, I was very surprised to find out he was asking me to attend this event in a very different capacity, as a speaker. A speaker? My first response was to ask the rabbi if he was sure he had the right number, for I'm no great Torah scholar, leader, or yeshiva graduate capable of delivering an insightful drush on the fly. I spend more time than I should admit reading articles on Chabad.org. Am I really the right person to be speaking here on this occasion? Rabbi Veli explained that yes, he did in fact have the right number, and he just wanted me to share a few words on my recent experiences with anti-Semitism, my journey to Yiddishkeit. I reluctantly agreed, while it started dawning on me that I wouldn't be able to do what I usually do, which is hide behind a saxophone or a clarinet. I'd actually need to be up here and speak. And in order to do this, first I would have to believe in my own unique strengths and talents as a simple Jew. I would fittingly indeed need to draw strength from one of the Rebbe's teachings, that every soul is put on this earth by Hashem to complete a mission, and that every Jew has the potential to fulfill this mission and elevate oneself to lofty heights of exceptional brilliance, even just a simple everyday Jew like myself. Now, I cannot emphasize just how ordinary I am. I was born in South Africa in a secular Jewish home. We had a mezuzah on the front door, but it was just a case. It didn't have a scroll in it. I went to an Orthodox Jewish day school. We davened at a Mezorti shul. We'd have Shabbat dinner on Friday nights, and that was about it as far as my Jewish home life growing up. When I was 8, my family relocated to New Zealand, where the only Jewish school finished at the end of primary due to the shortage of students to sustain a high school. So after Bar Mitzvah, I attended a Presbyterian school where the first thing the enrollment officer said to me was, "Now, I know you're Jewish, but you will not get special treatment here. You are to attend chapel like everyone else, and you are not allowed to wear your kippah." It was in this environment that I was taunted on an almost daily basis for the entirety of high school. From year 7 to 12, I was called Jew boy, insulted with gas chamber jokes. People would throw money at my feet and draw swastikas on my locker. Everyone responds to this sort of treatment differently, but I made the conscious decision to maintain a calm, unaffected outward appearance, whilst hiding the pain I felt on the inside. As a 13-year-old boy, I thought to myself 2 things. 1, I cannot let them see me suffering, because that's what they want. And 2, that if I can just convince them that I'm like them, I'm no different to them, I'm just a normal New Zealand boy, they will stop harassing me. And so I put up with this treatment without making much fuss. I put my kippah away, and I hid in the music department, burying myself in music to cope with this reality. When I finished high school, my family relocated again, and I came to Melbourne to study arts and music at Melbourne and Monash University. Whilst I was proud of my Jewish heritage, I continued the mantra I learned in high school of attempting to fit in, to assimilate, to be normal. I didn't know many people in the community here, and I wasn't living in the area, so I tried to just be accepted and treated in my new identity as jazz musician, to hide any aspect of my Judaism that made anyone too uncomfortable, to be a bagel and lox Jew. Fast forward a few years, and I meet my lovely wife, Maggie May. We start a business together and begin building our family. But despite such assimilation efforts, I was never truly comfortable or accepted, and I never felt like I fully fit in. As per the Rebbe's teachings, my soul was calling out for a life of mitzvot and for connection. Try as one might, a Jewish soul can never truly abort this mission. What's even more surprising is that my wife, who was born in Essendon in a non-Jewish atheist home, felt the same. Little did she know at the time that her own fascination with Jewish culture growing up was actually her own neshama calling out for this connection. Anyway, we tried our best to live decent moral lives within the framework of contemporary Australia. For example, we operated our business quite distinctly to the other local gift shops around. In conducting our business, we held ourselves to high ethical standards. We used our business to build community and bring people together. We supported many artists' livelihoods. We were overly generous with our time and resources. We practiced tzedakah, and we constantly worked on self-improvement and being kind and decent people. Even so, our souls called out for more. And as has always been the Jewish way, we accessed knowledge through the written word. First, we started reading more on Jewish history, about Jewish traditions, about my own family's history in Germany, about the deep and complex history of Israel and my family's connection there, about the First Temple, Galus, Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon Hara, Sefirot, Yiddish folk songs, Jewish life in Andalusia, so on, so on. We started to invite distant Jewish friends over for Shabbat on a weekly basis, those in the north and a few brave souls who ventured over from the south. We always made the joke that did they bring their passport? One day, a certain Rabbi David Gutnik of East Melbourne Synagogue came to our shop and dropped off Shemura Matzah to ensure we could celebrate Pesach properly. Through this simple act, we developed a relationship and sought out more opportunities to attend services and study. Again, the legacy of the Rebbe lives on in kind and generous souls like David, who facilitated a connection for far-flung Jews in the north, like Maggie and I. One day, we looked at our son and thought about what kind of life we wanted to live as he grows up. We decided to approach Rabbi Gutnik to broach the topic of conversion for Maggie. After the appropriate warning of the challenge ahead of us and a few months of deliberation, we decided to go all in. Over time, we started to transition our lives to Shabbat observance and to kashrut. We decided to move our home south and found a Jewish kindergarten for our son, 3 at the time. However, our trendy and creative Northside gift shop was doing well, and we couldn't take the risk of uprooting and moving it. After all, we were upstanding members of the Northside creative community, so we drove up and down Punt Road every day. Well, every day except for Shabbos. Shabbat, Saturday, historically the busiest day for our shop. It became the day that Maggie and I were not to be contacted by our staff. And this was met with a degree of frustration. Add to this, the customers who used to be delighted to see Maggie every Saturday started asking why she was not around. Maggie started covering her hair. I started wearing a kippah. As much as we were asking questions of God, people began asking questions of us. They would ask, why aren't you sending your son to the local primary school? But why do you suddenly live so far away in the south? Your challah must be nice, but what are your thoughts on the apartheid? One of Maggie's former friends asks her, why are you sending your son to a Jewish school? Is it so that they can indoctrinate him for you? She follows this up with, why are you converting? You know, they are not like us. Such low-lying tension continued for another 18 months until the 7th of October 2023. The barbaric genocidal actions of Hamas and the worst massacre of Jews in a single day since the Shoah was met with overwhelming silence by the community our shop was in, usually the loudest social activists in the world. And while we struggled to pull ourselves together to show up to work every day, the people we worked with, our suppliers, our staff, our customers, first in a trickle and then in a wave, started condemning Israel for genocide before the ground invasion had even began. And since we were a Jewish-owned business, surely we were then responsible for the genocide. We immediately noticed our revenue and shop attendance drop, resulting in the worst December period in 4 years. We made all sorts of excuses to ourselves, but deep down inside we knew why. This was all but confirmed when we witnessed one of our top customers who attended our shop weekly for 5 years suddenly stop coming in. Another one sent us a message to ask, I've noticed you've not posted about the genocide. As a Jewish-owned business, what is your stance on Palestine? Before I shop with you again, I need to know I'm supporting a business that supports a free Palestine. Such hostility was so prevalent throughout art and music circles in which we were historically enmeshed that I found myself joining a support group for Jewish creatives on WhatsApp. In January, a transcript of the chat was leaked to prominent anti-Zionist activists who identified me as an owner of Think Thornbury. While sharing excerpts of the chat, the activists invented a conspiracy theory involving Maggie, who was not in the group, in some kind of plan to take down prominent anti-Zionists for their advocacy on Palestine. Neither Maggie and I were ever involved in such a plan, but Lashon Hara spreads rapidly, whilst leaving a trail of destruction in its path. Overnight, the 7 years of goodwill and upstanding reputation we had both built in that community was decimated. Former friends ceased speaking to us, staff quit, almost all of our trades ceased, suppliers stopped working with us, local business owners we had known for almost a decade suddenly refused to make eye contact. And worst of all, we became victims of a vitriolic public boycott, harassment, and vandalism campaign. Our shop was plastered with boycott stickers picturing the Magen David on the Israeli flag with a cross through it, in a style reminiscent of my German Jewish grandparents' bakery in Berlin in the 1930s. The harassment and abuse got so bad that we resorted to locking the shop door during trading hours and vetting customers before they came in for the fear of our own safety after we had been verbally abused multiple times and received a death threat on our shop phone. We gave notice on our lease and made plans to leave the area as soon as we possibly could. Throughout this experience, I immediately noticed historic parallels, not just to what my grandparents experienced in Germany, but also to what Jews have experienced all over the world for centuries. In the Second Temple period, we were subject to Greek rule in Jerusalem. Officially, the Hellenist Greeks tolerated a degree of Jewish custom in our ancient homeland, but there was underlying tension between the contrasting worldviews and between political factions. This tension simmered for a while until it bubbled over and exploded during a period of political unrest and war in which Antiochus IV, aided by Hellenist Jews, their own version of Jewish anti-Zionists, wrested control of Jerusalem by force, invading and capturing our holy Beit HaMikdash. In the Tanu Rabbanan Maimah on Chanukah, the Rebbe teaches us that the Greeks didn't have a problem with the intellectual study of Torah. They actually recognized the wisdom that the Torah contained, and the Greeks valued intellectual pursuits. They also valued culture and tradition, and so officially had a policy of multiculturalism, liberalism, and democracy. Therefore, they didn't mind bagels and lox Jews, so long as Judaism was purely cultural. So the Greeks were okay with Torah study and the keeping of mitzvot that could be explained through reason, like the prohibition against stealing. However, the Greeks were deeply disturbed with mitzvot that could not be explained through logic or reason, like kashrut. Our response was, well, we keep these mitzvot that can be explained through reason because Hashem said to, and we keep these other mitzvot that cannot be explained through reason because Hashem said to. On a deeper level, the keeping of the illogical mitzvot is a reflection of the holiness of the Jewish people, because holiness is beyond logic. Back then, and still today, many Jews are willing to live lives that, in one sense, are made more difficult because of the observance of mitzvot. It would have been easier for Jews of the Second Temple period to placate the Greeks, accept their puppet appointment of the high priest, and do away with the aspects of their Jewish identity that made the Greeks uncomfortable. Perhaps Antiochus would have spared them lots of death and destruction. Certainly the Hellenizing Jews thought that to be the case. But the major Jewish response to such an affront to our way of life was to double down and respond with pure self-sacrifice and a commitment to Judaism that wasn't based on logic, but one that was based on the feeling that it is impossible for a Jew to live any other way. Where does this feeling come from? The Rebbe teaches us that this connection comes from the essence of the Jewish soul known as the Yechidah. The Yechidah is compared to a single jar of oil which was sealed with the stamp of the Kohen Gadol. Just like the Greeks could defile most of the oil in the Beit HaMikdash, but weren't able to defile that single jar of oil. The Greeks were able to penetrate the Jews' intellect, but weren't able to affect the essence of our soul. And so to fight back, the Jews would need to tap into their Yechidah. Similarly, it would have been simpler for me to continue living a culturally Jewish life in Melbourne's trendy north, rather than the deeper pursuit I now find myself in. On a purely rational level, it made no logical sense for me to pursue a more observant Jewish life. I was a well-established figure in the arts and music world. I had a successful small business. I was an in-demand musician being booked at some of the most prestigious venues and festivals in Australia and in Europe. But the feeling of giving all that up, to refuse to join the anti-Zionist Jews yelling in the street, rationalizing the massacre of our holy brothers and sisters in our ancestral homeland, comes from a deeper place than logic. It comes from my Yechidah. The Maccabees, a tiny rebel force from the tiny province of Judea, stared down the Greeks, an army far more formidable in power, numbers, and territory than them. They didn't have a plan for winning. They just knew that losing was not an option. When the rest of the Jews saw this commitment, they were also inspired to stand strong against all their spiritual challenges, connecting to the feeling deep inside of them that it was impossible to live their lives in any other way. Winning the war against the Greeks with self-sacrifice was a complete and total spiritual victory that defies reason. When we declared an independent state in our Holy Land after almost 2,000 years of exile, that defied reason. When we stared down 8 invading Arab armies under an arms embargo and won, that defied reason. When in April the Islamic Republic launched the largest drone and ballistic missile strike in history with almost no impacts in Israel, that defied reason. The fact that we, the Jewish people, continue to exist and thrive after all the oppression and persecution all over the world for thousands of years defines reason. We are beyond reason because we are holy. Many of us feel real anxiety and stress at this moment. October 7 has cast such a darkness over the world, and the feeling that we are outnumbered and overpowered by this darkness is overwhelming. Know that we have seen this many times before and that we will be okay. Our response to this moment must be like the Maccabees. We must tap into our Yechidah and pursue mitzvot. We should live meaningful lives enriched by Torah. We must double down on our self-sacrifice and efforts to spread light in the face of such darkness, so that we may transform this moment of darkness into holiness, like the Maccabees who wrested back control of our holy temple. The Rebbe explains that the kinnor, the harp in the Beit HaMikdash, had 7 strings, while the harp in the time of Moshiach will be beyond the limits of the natural order and therefore have 8 strings. As a musician, I'm yearning to hear what that 8th note sounds like. May we all be able to hear that 8th note with the coming of the Mashiach, the safe release of our hostages, and the revelation of a new era of peace. Shalom Aleichem.
Rambam ist do a Jigeres, was beschreibt sein Leben, sein Seder Hayim und sein Seder Achayim. Seht man als Bepele noch nicht gewähnt, als Mensch abal Yisurim. Afal Pikein, kommt zu der Maskone mehr in der Woche und sagt, das ist der Schkofe von Aiden, der Schkofe von Tera, als diese Aiden, was man darf gucken auf der Welt bei Ayin Teva. Mit der Tikwa-Teva, mit der Bitochen, Chosek, Vechuli, wie dort meirig, bekam die Zeus, was kommen Reis von der Hanoche.
I considered running the United States Congress in Florida. In 1989, I was running for Congress, something that had been a dream for a long time.
It was a big financial undertaking. He had sold a business. He was hiring people, and it was, he wasn't working, so we were going more and more in debt. We were young and didn't realize the impact of it.
I had no idea how really awful politics can be in terms of everything's reduced to bumper stickers, talk, bumper sticker language, nasty tactics. It was a rough going. I learned a lot through it. I did not win. We went up to my family's home up in the Berkshires, licking my wounds from a campaign.
Just needed to just be away from everything. He didn't have a job, and he had lost a lot of money, and he was at a really, really, really down time. All of a sudden, he gets a call from Rabbi Groner.
The Rebbe said that I should not be downtrodden, I should be happy. Although I didn't win, it was still a bracha, and that I would be able to go on to make other contributions.
His entire demeanor, his entire way of thinking was different after it.
Al derech wie das ist bei Chayev ha-Protim shel ha-Pesach, ha-Meire Nevuchim al derech sei das bei Chayev von Kol Am Yisrael. Sagt mir na Yidin ha-Zivui, Iv das Hashem besimcha. Und noch in derselbe Teira, wo das ist a Heroi, sagt mir na wenn is a Yid Eved Hashem, I das bechol drachecha doeu. Das ist a 24 Shoah Misles, is Eved Hashem, darf stehen in der Tnur von Simcha.
In 1956, my father had this building in Montreal. The ground floor of the building was his business, was the store, and the upper floors, the 2 floors, were rented out to small manufacturers. It was an 80-year-old building, and the insurance company told us that they were canceling the insurance. He didn't know how to deal with it. Everything was all on inventory. The inventory was flammable and everything could go at any time. He didn't feel he had the wherewithal to come up with enough money to tear it down and rebuild. He became very depressed. He came to New York with the plans for the building, and I joined the Lubavitcher Rebbe. My father was up at the desk with his hands flat on the desk, and he was bent over, and that's really how he had been for a couple of months, kind of bent over and depressed. The Rebbe said, "Reb Nosson, stand up straight." My father took his hands off the desk and he stood up straight, and then he told him that he has to be besimcha, and he has to be like a soldier who goes out to battle and doesn't know what's going to be, but he has the emunah that he's going to win. That's how you have to go back to Montreal and into your bank, to your bank manager, to the mortgage company, with full confidence that the Rebbeinu Shalom is on your side, and you're gonna be able to pull it off.
Konne sich bei sich werden erschrockener und herangefallener, was hat für ein Schliches. Was wird das konne mit Malle sein, sagten nee, soll's wissen sein, dass mehr nicht bei die, was haben mehr nicht wie eine Bosse. Der aber, was sind in der eine Bosse, ist jeder guckt auf Welt, ist beim Sumore Menechem hebt auf früher der eine Bosse sein und geht guck auf den Himmel. Und demut der Zetter Ruyu mi bore Eile wird beschaffen unter die Welt tegen. Und unter demut habt sagt, dass ist eine Welt, wo das Pardes und der Gani, die Genuni Shela Kodesh Baruch Hu.
ההורים שלי נכנסו לרבי. אמא שלי נכנסת ובוכה לרבי. wenn פה חתרוגנו mit dem Maschinen schmier. will nicht gehen mit dem Maschinen. hört nicht. Und will, dass der Rebbe soll גם הברוכה, ohne mehr. הרבי אמר לאמא שלי, tot vertrouwt mit dem Maschinen, weil Schemte verstehe ich. dein Bruder, dann mamschig sein kein mit dem Machschirm. Und wird nicht sterben in Shidduchim. Und dann בשים אנחנו בטוב לבוב. אחר כך, אמא שלי אמרה לרבי, אני הורדתי את המכשיר, אני רציתי שהרבי ייתן פרופת שאני אשמע. וקיוויתי שאני אשמע, שהרבי יברך ויפעול למעלה, שאני אשמע. כשהם יצאו, הכנסתי לרבי. הבאתי לרבי את הפתק. והוא אומר לי תוך כדי קריאה, ת"ז, בשים אנחנו בטוב לבוב. והרבי הרים את העיניים. ושואל אותי. Du hältst mir, ja, אמרתי לרבי, כן. הרבי אמר לי, אתה ממשיך sein kein mit dem Machschirm. Und du wirst sein Simcha b'tov levov. Und du wirst sein kein, du zurückgefangen nach Israel. Und du wirst lernen כמו Kiddushin. את fragt deine חברים, את רד mit den חברים. Und noch mal Kirche mit dem Ebenbesten. Und du wirst מצליח sein. Ich sagte dem Rebbe, aber ich will aber jetzt lernen gut. Der Rebbe hat gesagt, dann sei ein bisschen Simche. Und du wirst מצליח sein.
Was hast du sagt, als darf sein so mehr, ist Simen, als hat von was zu sein so mehr. War mit dem beim nicht monen kein Sach, war das nicht genommen ist, das Heper von Teresem. Und das hat wie von Teresem.
כשיצאתי מיחידס, הרגשתי שהרבי נתן לי כזה דחיפה שצריך להיות בשמחה. שברוך השם התחתנתי, הקמתי בית נאמן בישראל, ילדים פריים ושלמים, חיתנתי כמה ילדים. זה המסר שאני אומר, להיות בשמחה, וברגע שתהיה בשמחה, אתה תצליח.
He walked out of there a different person. The Rebbe just changed him from being despondent and worried to being confident. In fact, he shortly after managed to get the mortgage and managed to get it at a very good rate, and he did the building.
After the Rebbe's call, we moved to Maryland and he got a presidential appointment with President Bush.
I was a senior diplomat and VP of the U.S. International Development Corporation. The impact of the Rebbe's message to me was that we all try to write our own book of what we want our life to look like. But God has a much better book in mind.
Bischaß wird durchgenommen mit unter dem Gedank, mit der Haschkofe Alpitera. Unter dem wird der Be'el Pnei Melachai. Und lernt Teiro mis Mekaye Mitzvahs mit der Harchove Varvocho Kipshutom. Begashmiyus.
Our final speaker tonight is Rabbi Yossi Goldman, who has been in South Africa since 1976. After directing the first Chabad house in Johannesburg for 10 years, he was invited to serve as spiritual leader of Johannesburg's largest synagogue, the well-known Sydenham Highlands North Hebrew congregation. Following 35 years of outstanding leadership, he was appointed Rabbi Emeritus for life. He is widely credited with transforming the shul, in the words of Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, into one of the great synagogues of the English-speaking world. Rabbi Goldman's synagogue sermons are considered among the finest in the Jewish world, and his work is currently being translated into Hebrew, Spanish, French, Russian and German, among other languages. He's a Parsha columnist on Chabad.org and on Jewish News Syndicate, and his writings appear regularly in publications around the world. His first book, From Where I Stand, was published by Ktav USA in 2012 and will soon go into its third printing. Please join me as we warmly welcome Rabbi Goldman.
Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. Good evening. It's wonderful, beautiful, heartwarming to see the unity, the achdus of so many
organizations coming together tonight. And as you probably know, it doesn't happen that often. So it's very special to see. Well done to all the organizers. My wife and I are very, very impressed with your Melbourne Jewish community. It's not our first visit here, but we've had more time now to see and to experience and to feel the beautiful atmosphere of Yiddishkeit in your community. And we feel a lot better knowing that our son Yisrael, Izzy, and Batsheva have become an integral part of this wonderful community. To all the Rabbonim, to all the organizations, to the previous speakers, Bochi, Baila, Joshua, each one a unique presentation in their own way. It's my honor to be with you on this panel tonight. So I've been asked to talk about the Rebbe's approach to anti-Semitism. Well, you know, many people, many Jews decided that the way to deal with anti-Semitism is to stop being Jewish. I'm not Jewish, then I won't be a victim. Assimilation is a simple solution to the problem of anti-Semitism. Like Haimi Cohen. He decided to stop being Haimi Cohen. He became Horatio Cowan. And he had an operation on his Jewish-looking nose. He learned to play polo. And he started wearing plaid socks, doing all kinds of things Jews never did, you know. And then he applied, as the coup de grace, he applied to the fanciest, poshest, waspish country club in town where no Jews were allowed. And before he's accepted as a member, he has to have a personal interview with the chairman, Mr. Christopher John Buckingham III. And at the interview, he's looking at this chairman, and it seems to him like he has some Jewish features. And he's thinking to himself, should he say something or not? Eventually, he plucks up the courage and says, Mr. Buckingham, excuse me, but by any chance, do you possibly have some Jewish blood in your family? Buckingham stands up to his full height, pounds the desk. I beg your pardon. I'm a proud Presbyterian. My father before me was a proud Presbyterian. My Zayda Olav Hasholem was a proud Presbyterian. Or like the other guy who applied also to the same club, you know, and he got rejected. So he asked him, why did you reject my application for membership? He says, it's your religion, sir. He says, my religion? What's wrong with my religion? He said, on the application form under religion, you wrote Goy. So too many Jews have chosen to deal with anti-Semitism by simply opting out. Can't beat them, join them. Deny your Jewishness and you're safe. Problem solved. Until that rabbi on campus finds you. In April 2023, my wife and I led a shul tour of Israel, a third such tour. Because we'd done the usual stops on the first 2 tours, we decided to do something different, and we went to the south. We went to Ben Gurion's home, now a museum in Sde Boker, and we went to Kibbutz Kfar Aza. We got the guided tour from one of our previous tour guides, who was actually from Namibia originally, not far from South Africa, Ralph Lewinson. And I still remember Ralph's words showing us around Kfar Aza, where you could see Gaza just down the road over there. He said, this place is 90% heaven, 10% hell. Most of the time, it's heaven. We love it here. When the rockets come, 10% of the time, we go into the shelters and whatever, then it's a bit of hell. But otherwise, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, 5 months later, Kfar Aza would be 100% hell. The October 7th massacre left 52 of its 700 residents murdered, 20 still missing. Ralph and his family, thank God, survived, but they're still displaced and uncertain of if and when they may ever return. Believe it or not, South Africa, where we live, is actually pretty good from anti-Semitism point of view. It's probably the lowest in the world where any organized Jewish community lives. Despite the African National Congress taking Israel to the International Court of Justice, they do not represent the country, the people, and we suffer very little anti-Semitism, thank God. Back in the early 50s, the Rebbe was visited and interviewed by a well-known Jewish novelist at the time. His name was Harvey Swados. And the early 50s was not that many years after World War II and the Holocaust. And at the end of the discussion, Mr. Swados asked the Rebbe about the Holocaust. Rabbi, do you think it could happen again? When I read the report of this discussion, my heart went cold. A chill went down my spine when I saw the Rebbe's answer to that question. Could it happen again? The Rebbe said in Yiddish, Morgen in de Früh, tomorrow morning. It will not happen, he said. God will not allow it to happen again. But as far as the nations of the world are concerned, tomorrow morning. I was shocked. I could not get my head around the Rebbe's answer, I confess. I'm born and bred in America, land of the free, home of the brave. Jews have freedom of opportunity like never before in history. I was a teenager, I was a baseball fan. Sandy Koufax was the best pitcher in the whole of baseball, and he was a proud Jewish boy who didn't play on Yom Kippur. Joe Lieberman, a senator who died only a short while ago, an Orthodox Jew, almost became, he was this far, a hair's breadth from being the vice president of the United States. Jews could achieve anything in America. Every door was open in commerce, the professions, the Supreme Court, Hollywood, you name it. Another Holocaust tomorrow morning in America. I confess I did not understand the Rebbe's words. Today, sadly, I understand it all too well. I'm no longer shocked. When we heard our speakers earlier, when we know what is going around on in the world today, what has become acceptable even in the hallowed halls of the United States Congress, when Ivy League university presidents can't bring themselves to say that killing Jews is wrong, when we see unprecedented anti-Semitism around the world, hate, venom, violence, in places, not only Harvard, but Columbia University in New York City. You know that New York is the biggest Jewish city in the world, population, more than Jerusalem, more than any other Jewish city. And it's such a Jewish city. Some years ago, I was in Manhattan, and I see the official no parking sign, the municipal no parking sign on a street in Manhattan. You know what it says? It doesn't say no parking. It says, don't even think of parking here. It's an official New York City no parking, don't even think. It's a Jewish city. In a Jewish city like New York, a Jewish student is insecure and afraid to go to university, to Columbia? It's unbelievable. But the truth is that anti-Semitism has never been logical. You know, the Nazi goes up to the Jew back in the 30s and says, "You Jews, you're the cause of all the world's problems." And the Jew says, "Yes, you're right, sir. And also the bicycle riders." The Nazi says, why the bicycle riders? The Jew says, why the Jews? Exactly. Same logic. No logic. In Europe, they said, go back to Palestine. And today in Palestine, they say, go back to Europe. Holocaust deniers say there was no Holocaust. And in the very next sentence, they say, Hitler didn't kill enough. There's no logic. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, once said, before COVID, quite prescient, he said, anti-Semitism is like a virus. It keeps mutating. Remember COVID? Every time it mutated, a new version, a new form. Today it's anti-Zionism, a new mutation. So, in South Africa, the great icon, of course, was Nelson Mandela. And you might know that he was sentenced to life in prison for treason back in 1963. But you might not know, I'm sure the South Africans there will know, that 5 out of Mandela's 12 co-defendants, 5 out of 12, it wasn't just him on trial, 5 out of 12 were Jews. In other words, the Jewish community is one quarter of 1% of the general population, but 40% of Mandela's partners in crime for the struggle of the oppressed black majority were Jews. Let me ask you a question. Do you know who said these words? I quote, "The 10 Commandments have lost their validity. And as for conscience, that was a Jewish invention. Conscience is a blemish on the human psyche, like that other Jewish invention, circumcision. Circumcision damages the body, and conscience damages the soul." No? Who said that? Hitler, Yamach Shemoy, correct. And in one of his other writings, Hitler put it even more bluntly. The struggle for world domination, he said, is between me and the Jews. All else is meaningless. The Jews have inflicted 2 wounds on the world, circumcision for the body and conscience for the soul. I come to free mankind from their shackles. Wittingly or unwittingly, by birth, by design, or by the experiences of history, Jews became the conscience of the world. And the world doesn't appreciate it. They don't like it. The world doesn't want to be bothered or inhibited by matters of conscience. Which brings me to the Rebbe's somewhat different approach to anti-Semitism. He quoted the Talmud. Gemara in Shabbos says a very strange thing. We know that Mount Sinai was the venue of the Ten Commandments, the greatest revelation in history, where we received the Torah from God. But the Talmud says that the word Sinai, or Sinai, is etymologically related to another Hebrew word which sounds like it, although it's spelled differently, and the word is Sinah. Sinai, Sinah. Sinah means hatred. And the Talmud says that Sinai, or Sinai, Mount Sinai, was the beginning of the hatred of the world to the Jewish people. When we receive the Torah, we receive the mandate to become a light unto the nations, to become the conscience of the world. And that is precisely when we became the object of their hatred. Which means that Hitler and all the anti-Semites of history and all the venomous Palestinian sympathizers today, chanting from the river to the sea, whether they know which river or which sea is irrelevant, they're not only fighting Jews, more importantly, they were and are continuing to fight Judaism, the Jewish way of life. And if anti-Semites are targeting not just our bodies, but our faith, then the most correct and best response is not only to fight them physically, which we must, and may God give strength to Tzahal and our brave soldiers to continue the fight, and we should not lose one more brave soldier, God forbid. We have to fight not only physically, we have to fight spiritually. If they are trying to weaken us spiritually, to weaken our faith, we have to strengthen our faith. So Tzahal has to fight them physically, but the Jewish world, the Jewish people, has to fight them spiritually. So if we assimilate and join the country clubs, we've given up our Judaism. And we're giving Hitler and all his successors a victory. And the Rebbe always focused on the positive. You saw it in the film clips tonight, one after another, finding the positive in every situation, giving people encouragement, changing their lives. I remember I was actually in Australia. I was in Perth 5 years ago on the occasion of the Rebbe's 25th Yartzeit. And I read that in Los Angeles, a Jewish writer, I think he's the editor of the Jewish newspaper in Los Angeles, David Suissa, he coined a phrase which I really appreciated. He said, what was the Rebbe's response to anti-Semitism? Pro-Semitism. The opposite of anti is pro. The Rebbe said, don't waste your energy on fighting the negativity. Whether it's Tzahal who has to do that, or the board of deputies, or whoever has to do that, let them do that and be successful. But what do all of us have to do? Instead of fighting the negativity, you saw the films, you saw the campus rabbi putting on tefillin. My son in Cape Town is the campus rabbi at the University of Cape Town. The exact same film clips I could have shown you, with demonstrations and on the campus of UCT, and they're standing there putting on tefillin and singing Am Yisrael Chai. At the end of the day, it's a waste of energy to focus on the negativity. We should focus on the positive. And so the Rebbe did just that. Back in 1967, he started a mitzvah campaign which would grow to many mitzvahs, but it started with tefillin. And it was specifically linked to the safety and security of Israel and Tzahal. And he quoted the verse in the Torah and the Talmud and Brochus, that when the nations of the world will see the name of God upon you, meaning the tefillin, it will strike fear into their hearts. And the Rebbe began mitzvah campaigns of tefillin and Torah study and mezuzahs and Shabbos candles and tzedakah and Jewish books and mikveh and kashrut and Jewish education and loving one another, and do one more mitzvah, one more act of kindness, even if it be random kindness. And he reminded us that every single mitzvah has cosmic significance, and a single good deed performed in Melbourne sends good vibrations and spiritual blessings of protection to Israeli soldiers defending our people from those who would massacre us again, God forbid, tomorrow morning, and to our brothers and sisters in Israel and around the world. And that's why it's so inspiring now. You call this resilience, strength, continuity. We have seen inspirational resilience, strength, and continuity in Israel amongst those who could have become the most depressed of all. Those who are fighting in Gaza, those who've seen their friends fall in battle, those who've seen friends injured, maimed, God forbid. And what do we see? What is their response? They're not only singing Am Yisrael Chai, they're clamoring for another mitzvah. They're begging for tefillin. They're begging for tzitzit. It's unbelievable. Secular kibbutzniks who were not raised at all with any meaningful Yiddishkeit are singing and dancing Shema Yisrael together with the Hasidim. Religious and secular together. It is so beautiful, so inspirational. Talk about resilience. That is true Jewish resilience. And that's exactly what all of us need to be doing. You might be surprised to hear that one of my great religious heroes is not a rabbi. Supposedly he wasn't so religious at all. Before Netanyahu, he was the longest serving Israeli prime minister, and its first prime minister, David Ben-Gurion. You know, Ben-Gurion was once asked to open a Jewish book fair in Jerusalem. So he's going there and he's about to open the ribbon, and there's a little Chabad bookstall, you know. And the Chabadnik has the chutzpah to ask Ben-Gurion if he'd like to put on tefillin. He wasn't religious, but he wasn't stupid. You know what Ben-Gurion said? Pamayim bayom? Twice in one day? I think Ben-Gurion agreed with the Rebbe, because one of his greatest lines, which I consider to be part of the correct response to anti-Semitism. Ben-Gurion said, it doesn't matter what the world says, it matters what Israel does. At the end of the day, whatever Israel is doing, the world is not happy. We might have the most moral military in the history of humankind, and they're still criticizing us. And we're still going to be condemned in the International Court of Justice and whatnot. But Ben-Gurion agreed with the Rebbe. We have to do what we have to do. Israel must protect itself and not worry about public opinion. You're going to get condemned whatever you do, so do the job and finish the job ASAP. And we have to keep being Jewish, and proudly so. You know, in our Jewish day schools, we have Holocaust education. And I remember former past chief rabbi of the United Kingdom, Lord Rabbi Jacobowitz, Olav Sholem, once arguing that perhaps we spend too much time on Holocaust education in our Jewish day schools, because we don't want kids to come out feeling Judaism as negative. Antisemitism. Right now, today, you think that Being Jewish is all about anti-Semitism, unfortunately. We forget that that's just one part of Jewish life. There's a positive side of Jewish life. There's a Torah, there's a way of life, there's a value system, there's a beautiful Jewish way of life, of Yiddishkeit. It's fantastic. There's anti-Semitism. Okay, we have to deal with anti-Semitism. Jews were not created just to defend ourselves against racists. We are here in a positive mission to change the world for the good, to be proud and practicing Jews who are confident and knowledgeable and live as Jews and raise our children and grandchildren as Jews. And the modern state of Israel was not created because of the Holocaust. That's a Palestinian Bobemeiser. That they gave us a state, that Europe gave us a state because they felt guilty of what they did to us in Europe, and we took away the Palestinians' land. That's not true. Israel was created in 1948, should I say recreated, because it is our land. And it's been our land for well over 3,000 years, long before there was such a thing as a Palestinian or even Islam. We have a history. We have a destiny. And part of that history and destiny is that God made us not chosen for privilege, but chosen for responsibility to be that light to the nations. Yes, to be the conscience of the world, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So hopefully all of us, Jews around the world and especially in Israel, we'll learn from Ben Gurion's line that it doesn't matter what the nations say, it matters what Israel does. We'll learn from the people of Israel and their courage and strength and resilience despite what they are going through. You know that before October 7th, they have this global happiness survey. Are you familiar with it? Israel has been steadily climbing up the ranks in the global happiness survey. In the most recent survey, Israel reached number 5, the 5th happiest country in the world. Way ahead of the United States and England and Australia and certainly South Africa. Ahead of Switzerland. A couple of Scandinavian countries, Finland always wins for some reason. That Israel came in 5th is unbelievable. We have to learn from the people of Israel. They live in the worst neighborhood in the world, surrounded by mortal enemies trying to drive them into the sea, and they're happy. And they keep on doing what they have to do. And we should learn from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who kept reminding us that non-Jews respect Jews who respect themselves. And certainly, tonight as we mark the 30th Yartzeit of the Rebbe, our saintly mentor and teacher, the man who changed the world, we should learn from the Rebbe to be more proud of who we are and to practice even more than we ever did before as Jews, wherever we live, Israel, South Africa, down under. Whatever the circumstances, we should not only be Jewish and not run away to country clubs and change our names and noses. We should be proud of who we are. And it'll help Israel. It'll help us. It'll help our children and our grandchildren. And it will help bring Moshiach now. Amen.
Tonight, each of our presenters has shared the Rebbe's Torah and direction and how it has helped them in their journey toward the light. Thank you all for coming and joining us tonight. let us each take one step to take on the task the Rebbe has left us with, to believe in a better world, to increase in kindness, in strength, in pride, in Judaism, so that together we build a world where, as the prophet Isaiah said, Lo yariu v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kodshi, ki mala ha'aretz deya et Hashem kamayim liyam achasim, that in all of my holy mountain nothing evil or vile shall be done, for the land shall be filled with the knowledge of God, as water covers the sea. May we meet next time with a true and final redemption, with peace in our hearts, in our families, in our world, and especially in our holy land. Thank you.